Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started, everyone. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. I'm Adrian Ott, and I'm on the board of WITI, and I'm so thrilled to be associated with WITI, and I'm so excited about the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is personal innovation and leadership. What an appropriate topic for WITI's 25-year anniversary. I mean, what an incredible celebration. And when I start to think of innovation and leadership, I think of Carolyn Layton. I mean, my goodness, what an inspiration to us all. I don't know if Carolyn's here, but I just want to, why don't we give Carolyn a hand for all the inspiration and leadership she has provided to WITI. So what we're going to talk about today is how personal innovation and leadership has changed throughout the years and what are the challenges as we move forward. How many of you work with virtual teams today? Can I see a show of hands? Almost all of you. How many of you work with people that are outside of your corporation to get your job done? Vendors, customers, partners, almost all of you again. Have any of you ever worked with people where you have never met the people on the other side? So you've only Skyped them or you've had telephone conversations with them? Kind of reminds me of an interesting story when particularly when I work a lot with European men. My name is spelled in the masculine sense. I don't know why my parents picked that, but it's kind of interesting. I'll be emailing and writing to folks in Europe, and then we'll decide to have a telephone call. And they'll call me up, and they'll say, okay, I'm looking for Adrian. I'm like, I'm here. And they expect that I'm the administrator. So it's kind of an advantage to have a name because they had all these perceptions about me, and it's really really kind of fun when I blow their minds and they realize that I'm a woman and I'm not quite what they expected. So it's kind of interesting some of the dynamics we have when we have this expanding universe of different types of people that we work with and people that we haven't necessarily met in person before. So I am so honored to have a panel here today to talk about personal innovation and leadership and how they've applied that to this expanding universe that we have of collaborations and relationships and ecosystems, not only personal ecosystems. Sandy spoke in the last half hour about a lot of the social media relationships and things, but also your business has an ecosystem of relationships as well. So we're going to talk about that in today's session. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists, who I'm so excited to have here today. First, on my left, we have Hayley Tabor. Hayley is at EMC, and she's the VP of Global Industries. She joined tech 25 years ago, and she's had global roles in Canada, Western US, and EMEA. And she actually took CA into the Middle East, which is quite an accomplishment for a woman. 10 years, she's had global roles, diverse companies, high-performing teams that she's worked with throughout the different companies that she's done business with. So welcome, Hayley. Second, we have Anasuya Morrill, who has been in the technology industry for over 16 years with leadership roles at Andersen Consulting, Oracle, and HP. In her various roles, she has been responsible for growing partner revenue via alliance roles, leading strategy, business development, and business planning functions. And in that capacity, she has driven a lot of cross-business initiatives like services and hardware strategies for big data and mobility. So welcome, Anasuya. And then lastly, we have Carolyn Crandall, who is Vice President of Marketing for Maxta. Carolyn has over 25 years with a proven track record in the industry, and she is an acknowledged expert in marketing, sales, and channel best practices. At Maxta, she's responsible for driving company brand awareness and visibility and creates worldwide marketing programs to accelerate revenue, build out enablement programs, and fuels growth with partners. She's also establishing robust social media, customer community programs as part of those activities. Prior to joining Maxta, Carolyn served as Vice President of Marketing at Nimble Storage. And before joining Nimble, she held Vice President roles with Riverbed, Seagate, Juniper Networks, as well as positions with Cisco and other companies as well. So why don't you join me in welcoming our panel. So in order to frame, we're talking about this expanding universe of collaborations and people that we're doing business with. And some of these people, they know us, they see us, they work with us, they sit next to us. And then there's the whole set of people that we're working with virtually. And so one of the insights that I've had, that I've realized over the years, and I'm going to ask every person on the panel to share their insights, but in order to frame this up, I wanted to share one insight that I've had because I worked both in a global corporate America kind of environment for 18 years, and then I moved off to starting my own company and moving into entrepreneurship. And one of the key insights that I've had over the years is you don't need to own it to control it. And so this is something, even as an individual contributor in a big corporation, you don't need to own it to control it. And so with that theme and background in mind, I thought what I'd do is open with Hayley. Since you've worked in many matrix types of organizations and certainly not in control of those kind of environments, what are some tips that you could provide to talk about how to best work in a matrix kind of organization?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because more and more companies are operating in a matrix environment. And just a little bit about my role at EMC. So I run EMC's vertical businesses. So my teams are global and healthcare and state and local government as well as oil and gas. And the number of stakeholders that touch the business or that we need to influence around my business is tremendous. And I think if I was to share a tip, it would come down to communication, which sounds pretty simple, but communication comes in different forms. And one of the most effective forms, in my experience, is being a good listener. And it's interesting because I'll share with you a story. When I was 35 years old, I worked for then Computer Associates, and I received a huge promotion. I was going to move from the US to London, and I was going to run their EMEA operation. And I remember the day before I went saying to the CEO, how am I going to mobilize 2,000 people? And he looked at me and said, 2,000 people? There's 7,000 people in Europe. I said, yeah, but 5,000 of those people don't work for me. He said, welcome to leadership, because as of right now, they do. And it's interesting because the day I arrived, and I don't know how many of you know the UK, but the office was just outside Slough. And so I was at the Slough Marriott, which, not so nice, but that's okay. And I saw all of these executives in the lobby that were going to be meeting with me at 7 a.m. in the office. And none of them knew that I was coming. And I had spent 2 months leading up to this position looking at these guys' backgrounds, what they did, and kind of what their track records were. And I actually selected this team without ever meeting these guys. And I walked into the boardroom in our office in Datchet, and there were 10 men sitting around the room. 2 of them could not speak one word of English. They were all much more experienced than I was. And even though I had been raised in Canada, born in the UK, I sounded American. The Americans, they don't think I sound American, but I sounded American. And I had to gain their respect. And I had to gain the respect of that entire organization. And what I did was I spent 6 months on the road listening. And I was curious. And I just listened, and I learned so much about their business that when it was time for me to speak, I could ask the best questions. And so if I was sharing a tip, I would just like to make everyone aware that it is so important to listen. And I think if you listen, you ask the right questions, and you will be able to influence in a matrix organization. And it seems to have been working for me so far, so that would be my tip.
Well, that's a very different dynamic than the traditional hierarchy of management that has always been there. Do you find that as a woman that you're at an advantage in being able to listen more?
I've never really thought of it like that. I mean, I've been very fortunate in my career. When my career started when I was younger, a lot younger, I'm going to get that 25-year thing out of my intros, by the way, but when I started my career, I remember being in Canada and there was a CIO conference. And it was the Q&A, and the chairman and CEO were at this meeting. And somebody actually said, Mr. Wong, why do you have so many women in leadership positions in Canada? It's like, I can't believe you asked that question. And Mr. Wong looked at me and said, do we? And so I kind of had this opportunity in my career never to be so aware of that, but I don't know, it's just something I think that just works for me. And part of listening is really caring. Like, you really have to care what you hear. And I'll tell you, I mean, I got a crazy busy life. Sometimes I get a phone call and it's 6 o'clock and I got stuff going on with my kids, or I'm just in the middle of something and I can't listen and I won't take the call. I'll say to the person, I can't listen to you right now. So it's never been a gender thing for me, but it's worked for me.
That's outstanding. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
So maybe a comment. So again, just in terms of introductions, Anasuya, I recently left HP, and in that role and in that team, I had the opportunity to work across a number of different teams, many of whom I've never had the opportunity to meet in person, many team members that I worked with virtually, and also many people that, to Hayley's point, were not necessarily obligated to work with me, for me, or help me in whatever activity I was driving. And at the time, the most recent role was really looking at business strategy, go-to-market engagement, and the approach for our Americas enterprise group. And so, one of the things that actually really struck me, and it was a recent theme at HP, was around the concept of earning your spot on the team. And I think that sometimes we forget that, right? Whatever level you are, an individual contributor, a manager, a director, a VP, you sort of think you're entitled to people having time and wanting to spend time with you and wanting to be on the phone with you. And so I think it's important. One of the recent HP themes, they had this concept of earning your ticket and earning your time with the team, and asking yourself, with whatever team, whether they're directly reporting to you, peers or virtual, would they vote for you to be on that team in terms of that project or that activity? And so when I think about really leveraging a matrixed organization, really working together as a team, I think to myself in the concept of being fair with people's time and really being efficient and helping people understand what that outcome is. So when you get on, and I'll use a simple example that actually wasn't at HP, but when you get on the phone with someone, do you clearly explain what you're trying to get out of the conversation and what's in it for them? And are you enrolling them in what you're trying to accomplish? Because if not, you've already lost them. Like after 5 minutes, they're already working on social media and thinking about what they're doing from a Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, what have you perspective. And it was interesting, at one point I left consulting, and in consulting, you have the opportunity to talk about things for an extended period of time, and actually people will entertain you, whether they're checked in and listening, I don't know, but they will be polite and listen to you. So I left Anderson Consulting and went to a small company called CBeyond, and I don't know, maybe 300 people, and there was one guy on my team, again, not obligated to engage with me, a virtual member of my team, and I would always send him these emails, and he would never respond to me. And finally I saw him and I'm like, his name is Scott, and I said, Scott, what is up? I send you these emails, I'm asking for help, and you totally ignore me. Why? And he said, you know what, Anasuya, if I cannot see your entire email and what you want in the preview screen, I'm not interested. And it's just an important, and this was not when people were on Facebook or Twitter, but it was a really important lesson for me in terms of are you earning your spot on the team? What are you asking for from the people that you're reaching out to? Are you really clear? Say it in the beginning, like I'm trying to get the following accomplished in 30 days or a week or today or tomorrow, and then explain why. Because if you haven't gotten them engaged in the first 2 or 3 sentences, whether it's on the phone or an email, you're really probably out of luck. And so that's something that just struck me from that story. And so if you ever receive an email from me, I would like to say that you could probably get the point in the preview screen. And then if you want to know more, you can read the rest of the email.
So Anasuya, I really love this concept of earning your spot on the team and being really clear and being respectful of people's time. It sounds like almost that even when you're dealing with internal employees that are across a matrix organization where you may not necessarily have the title, or you may have the title, but they may not report to you. You have to earn that respect, and of course, I'm all over that with my timographics model in terms of people triage their time, and so it sounds like what what you're getting to on this is the fact that just like a sales rep cold calling somebody,
Yes,
when you're
absolutely.
dealing with somebody in the organization you don't know very well, you have to be able to engage them very quickly in order to get them on your, as part of your team.
Immediately. I mean, I think about it, every one of us from a day job perspective, right? You've got instant message going, whatever the tool is your company goes. You might have 5 or 6 conversations going on. You're on a conference call, you're on an email, you may not even have 2 or 3 minutes between calls to figure out how to respond to the various different inputs coming to you asking for information. And that's coming to you asking for stuff that you need to provide back and help. At the same time, you have things you need from that same set of people that have that same triage going on a daily basis. And so I really am sensitive to what am I asking for from someone when I'm sending them an instant message. It's a basic thing. Look, I have a question, it's going to take 2 minutes. And being sensitive to that, being respectful to people's time, and it all comes back to the earning your spot on the team. So if I'm on a team, do you know what you're signing up for? How many of us have sat in a room, and I was thinking of this as I was standing back here, in a meeting, and there's like 10 people in the meeting, and it could be an in-person meeting or on a conference call, and there's like 1 or 2 people that are really engaged in the meeting, and the rest of you, or I find myself in the same conversation sometimes, are thinking, why am I here? What's going on? And I would recently, and this was something that struck me, recently I participated in the Simmons Women's Leadership Conference, and I don't remember the woman's name, but it was the daughter of the guy of Alan Funt from Candid Camera, and she was talking about time management and managing white space, and she had this acronym that she called SBH, shouldn't be here. And she said, if you find yourself there and you're like checked out and IMing and on the phone, why are you on that conversation? Are you earning your spot on the team? And if not, and if it's really not relevant for you, then manage your time better and get off the phone. Get out of that. To Hayley's point, I don't have time to listen to this right now, or maybe it would be more efficient to have me participate for 10 minutes and then I'm going to move on to a different discussion.
Or ask your role.
Right.
Or, ask
or what
your
is my role
is,
here?
right.
And that comes back to earning
Right.
the role on the team, right? You say, okay, if you're leading the discussion, and then explain what everyone's role is on the team so that they can all contribute. Or if you're on one of those calls, and we've all been on them, or meeting where no one explains everyone's role on the team, then be empowered and ask what you think your role is, or define your role. So at least you're not thinking SBH in your mind.
And I like what you said about putting it out there on the email exactly what you want. And I used to work at HP. We worked together at HP. And one of the things that happens with big companies is this publisher perish feeling. Like you gotta be writing down so much. And same type of thing. I mean, I think big companies, you fall into the trap of lengthy emails, and it just doesn't work. Text messaging is awesome.
I love text messaging. Yeah.
Text messaging is the way some of my team is here. That's the way I communicate with them, quick and direct.
One of the greatest ways I've heard that summarized up is called the fist rule. If it's longer than your fist, it's too long.
Yep. That's about the preview screen.
Yeah, it's about the preview screen, and that and that does work. And it's something that I've explained to people that have worked for me in my teams is, look, if it is longer than a fist, then it's too long. And so start with that so we can understand what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to say, what kind of response you need, and then we can always continue the conversation. But it really helped people net it out, and really thinking about it. If you haven't netted it out in that short of a field, then you probably need to go back and revise it to get the answer that you want. The other thoughts that came through my mind as you all were talking was live in the moment. I mean, how many times are we so distracted, and maybe you shouldn't be there, right? If you're off emailing, texting, if you're at dinner with your family and you're texting, or in a meeting and you're texting, put it down, right? So if it's not important enough to be engaged, because it's really frustrating, and it is the reputation you leave with the other people around you, right? So if you are disconnected or disengaged, then they're going to remember you that way. And is that the way that you want people to perceive you, as checked out? Or do you want people to go, you know what, I want this person to be in the meeting because they're valuable, they contribute. And sometimes with new people coming into things, you might go, well, I don't really understand the topic or the subject enough. Take notes. I mean, so many times people do meetings and they don't summarize or capture the items. take notes, and then you can either add value by sharing them back with everybody, or you can use it for validation to see, did I really understand what was going on? So think in that value perception. Is there value to you, or are you giving value back in that meeting? And if you're not, then maybe it's not a good investment of time.
You know, it's amazing to me how many meetings that I've attended where people don't write anything down.
Oh, I know.
And one of my roles at HP for a period of time was I ran enablement. And I used to try to go to all the new hire training because I think onboarding is really important. And I remember sitting in the session with 100 new hires from all different parts of the business. And I sat there for a couple of hours. There were all kinds of great speakers at HP who were investing their time. And you could have counted on one hand the number of people who were writing things down. It was just shocking to me. It's like, you've just joined a company, this is an opportunity. And none of us have photographic memory. So I really encourage that. And I think it goes back to the listening. When you're engaged and you're noting what people are saying, that's observed, that's respected. And I think it shows respect for their time as well. So
Especially if you're in an interview too. I'll tell you, I can't tell you, if somebody comes up to interview with me and they don't pull out a notepad and they don't start making notes or writing anything down, it again just makes me feel like they don't care or they're not engaged. And so, you know, again, I'd highly recommend it. Just, you know, make a few notes, a few comments, because you know what, we're not perfect. None of our memories, especially as we get a little older, they go. So, you know, it's good. Show that you care about what people are saying. Jot down a few notes, remember them. And it will help. The one other thing, and then I know you want to go back to some of your questions, that somebody else had told me years ago, which I love, is that people won't remember what you said or did, but they will remember how you made them feel. Mm-hmm. And I love that quote. I wish I could remember who to attribute it to, but think about it. You know, again, they won't remember, but they will remember, did you make them feel good? Did you make them feel bad? Were you engaged or not? So again, just something that I actually had it written on my monitor for the longest time to just remember. You know, it's like, how is this person feeling about the conversation? Even if sometimes you have to deliver tough news, but did you do it in a way that they made them feel respected and valued and understanding of the decisions you had to make?
Outstanding. This is really great. I think I'm going to turn to Anasuya, and I'm going to ask you about, obviously, above and beyond managing the strategies, financials, and operations of, as part of the senior management teams that you're part of, how have you used empowerment of those supporting you? How have you empowered others to deliver against this expanding universe, the fact that there are these huge teams and they're getting big and getting bigger and more amorphous? So could you maybe share some insights on that?
So I feel really passionate about the topic and the word of empowerment. First of all, I don't believe that anyone truly empowers you. You empower yourself. And so when you're in, first of all, when you're in a meeting or you're in a room, you are empowered, right? You wouldn't be invited to that meeting or that call or that conversation if you were not empowered. And I think sometimes each of us sometimes forgets that. And I remember one time I went to a meeting and it was, every single person in that meeting was a vice president. There were probably 15, 18 people there. And it was a pretty divisive topic about where we're going to invest certain resources across a variety of different business units versus shared resources like account management, global account, et cetera. And probably 4 to 5 people in that room actually said something. And I left the room. I said something, by the way, because I usually always do. But I left the room, and one of the leaders of that meeting said, you know, I cannot believe that only 4 or 5 people said something in this room. There's 18 vice presidents in this room. If you're invited to a meeting, people want to hear your point of view. Have a point of view. Take what Hayley said in terms of listening. You could listen in a meeting for 20 minutes and not say a word, but then say something. Be engaged and be empowered, and take that empowerment for yourself. So first, Adrian, to your point, I really strongly believe that we are all empowered. And if you look at opportunities to have a point of view, listen, learn, and share your input, people generally want to hear it because you know what? They're looking for the opportunity to have an engaged conversation. They want to have people participate. They want it to be productive and outcome-based. So that would be sort of the first part of my feedback on empowerment and my thoughts around it. In addition, I think it's really important to help the team, the group, the community you're working with really understand what you're expecting from them, and that's how you can help people be empowered. So, for example, when I'm leading a team or a meeting or a call, I make it a best practice to go around to everyone in the room and say, look, what we're trying to accomplish here is the following. Hayley, what I'm really hoping to get from you is this. Adrian, what I'm hoping to get from you is this. You do an incredible job of facilitating conversations, driving a dialogue around marketing or communication strategy, what have you. And then I might say, Carolyn, what I'm really hoping you can help us have as a part of this discussion is really to help us frame out what our strategy is. You do an incredible job of really helping us understand what are all the different pieces and how they come together. Through that, you're complimenting the person, you're empowering them, and then also you're helping everyone else in the room understand what value that person brings to the table. And that, to me, is truly empowering. Because you give that person, there's a book out there called, I think it's called Giving the A, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called. But the concept is that when you're in a meeting or you're in a room, instead of thinking to yourself, oh, I heard that person, doesn't do the greatest job in planning projects or what have you. We have all been in meetings, rooms where we think, 2 or 3 people in this room can really help me. What would happen if you actually said, I'm going to give everyone an A ahead of time. I'm going to look at what is possible from each of the people here and help others understand that. And then let's really try to have an outcome that we want to accomplish. And to me, that's really empowering, is helping other people understand the value of everyone that you're working with.
And you're also recognizing
Yes.
them as a contributor to the group. Carolyn, do you have any further thoughts on that? I know you've done a lot of work in terms of identifying leaders and looking at attributes that help to create a leader. I mean, could you share some perspectives as it relates to this?
Sure, absolutely. And I believe that you don't have to carry a title to be a leader. I think everybody carries their own leadership qualities, and you need to think about what your strengths are. Resources, I actually love Strength Finders the 2.0, in case people haven't. It's a $10 quiz you can take online. You can get the book too if you want. But go on in it, and instead of us always getting focused on our weaknesses, it focuses on our strengths. And it'll ask you a bunch of questions, and then it'll give you your top 5 traits and characteristics, and then it'll give you a chance to internalize it. And so I've done this. I've done it as part of a mentoring group that I do with the Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals, and we did a readout, and it was really interesting to talk to each of the different people about those characteristics, and how they are their strengths and how they can play to them. So think about what your strengths are and how you can build upon them. And it also gives you an opportunity then that says, well, based upon my strengths, maybe I can volunteer to do different things inside of a meeting that can help move things forward. I had started with a company once, and I was days in, and they were talking about their sales meeting that was coming up in a few weeks. And it was a small company, unstructured as most small companies are. And I was going, oh my goodness, wow, I've seen big sales meetings and how they can be great or they can be disastrous. And so I kind of jumped in and went to the executive team and said, look, let me help you put together your presentation. Let me help with the flow of the entire event. And nobody gave me the right. Nobody asked me if you would go do this. I kind of looked at it and said, this is headed for trouble. I can make it better. And so I started to just offer, can I help you with this? Can I listen to your presentation? Can I give you feedback on your slides? And so it was great, because in the end, everybody came away saying, oh my gosh, this is so much better. And they also understood what everybody else was doing. And that was the center points that I could bring in, is to say, well, look, don't cover this. It's being covered here. And let's make this a continuation of the story. So look for opportunities that you can do that in your own role, and volunteer for something that you're like, you know what, I know I'm really good at this, so I can help. It'll give you exposure, it'll show your own leadership of taking initiative, and it'll help you stand out. So again, just an idea of how you can play that in any role, regardless of your level or title in the organization.
Hayley, do you have any further thoughts?
Just a comment on when you talked about empowerment. I think you can take that also into your career. And the one thing that, when I reflect on my career, that I always was sure to do was make sure that my manager knew what my expectations were for my career. And so my expectations when I was 25 years old and 30, I always knew what I wanted to do, and I made sure I communicated that. So I was empowered. I've empowered my own career. Nobody did that for me. Nobody was waiting for, nobody was just going to say, well, what would you like to do? I had to go and tell them what I wanted to do. And so I think to be an effective communicator about your career is something that I can tell you even with my team. I want to know what their expectations are. What's your expectation for your career? What's your expectation for your team's career? each of your team members. So just a thought on that. I think empowerment goes very personal too with career development.
It's a good thought too, because I'll tell you, people have come to me and said, I want to be a director, or I want to be a VP inside of the organization. And you know, it's great to have career aspirations, but I think a better way to approach it is understand, what does it mean to be at that level, and what are the expectations for that position, and then doing an assessment that says, if somebody was going to ask you against the criteria, do you have the skills? So a much more effective conversation would be, I want to be an effective leader that has these traits. Maybe you're lacking in a certain area, to have a discussion with your boss going, how do I get exposed to an environment where I can build on these strengths? And then once you've been able to check the box, you can have a conversation going, it's my understanding the criteria to be at this level is this. Here's all my accomplishments against this. And then you can have a much more productive conversation about, now that you've met the criteria, wouldn't it be nice to be able to move to that next level, versus a lot of times you just get the question and it doesn't go over very well, and people will leave frustrated going, well, I've been here a number of years, why can't I just have this? People around me have gotten promoted. But understand what it is first, have that career planning discussion, and then be able to come to the table going, I've mastered all of these areas. And then sometimes it's just timing, right? When the next role or position or opportunity, but you'll be in a much more powerful position coming in prepared that way.
If I could just comment on that, just two things. One, just something tactical, thinking about, you know, instead of, for example, saying, you know, I want to be an X, whatever that title is, and thinking about the attributes. I think, Carolyn, that's a really excellent point. I mean, there's so many easy, basic ways to do that, whether you're doing it for yourself or you're sharing how to empower your own team to think about what they need to do to the next level. Take the 7 or 8 job descriptions that are out there for a function, whether it's sales, alliances, business development, operations, marketing, what have you. Every company has 7 or 6 or 7 different, at every level, job descriptions. Read them. Work with your team member to really understand what are the attributes or responsibilities that are truly different at each level. And so then that person can be empowered to actually talk about the attributes they want to develop. And then the only other comment I would make on that, which I just can't help bringing up, is the concept of mentorship. There are a number of different people that I've had conversations with over time from a mentor perspective, both from me finding myself in a mentorship type relationship with someone who's helping me grow and learn, but also people who have approached me and said, I'd like you to be my mentor. I personally am not a fan of that, can you be my mentor type direct conversation. I'm more of a fan of, I've noticed that you have these attributes, and I would really like to learn how to drive a strategic planning framework. I've noticed that you do that. Can you help me do that? That to me is a really productive way to have a conversation and really develop a relationship, whether it's coaching, mentorship, because both parties, and it kind of comes back to the expectations management, know what you're trying to get out of it. And it comes back to, Hayley, your point in regards to really understanding what the team expects of you and what you expect from the team. That's a great way, instead of approaching someone to say, will you be my mentor, say, I've noticed you do the following things, and I would really like to learn how.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anasuya. I think at this point, I'd like to open it up to Q&A. During the last part, if you have any questions of our panelists. I think Rick if anyone has any questions for our panelists.
Anybody?
Okay, there's someone over here.
Hi, my name is Melissa Ricks, and I work for AT&T. I have a question about email when you were speaking of having it the point in the preview. So my question is, how often during the day do you check email? I know I find myself checking it all throughout the day, and then I feel like by the end of the day I don't really get a whole lot accomplished. So I'm just curious as to how often you check email.
Probably all of us feel passionate about that topic. You know, I think it's very difficult to set specific rules around email. You know, candidly, I go through stages where I'm like, oh my God, I don't even want to see. You know, I want it to be white at the bottom of my screen, and I don't want to see any emails, and then it's like thousands. You know, so it's a stressful thing to manage. I would say the best practice, which I don't always adhere to, the best practice to me is to say, okay, you know, I'm going to start my day. I'm going to go through all the things that I think are urgent or, I have email rules, folders, all those kinds of things. But I'm going to go through things that are urgent and I'm going to respond quickly. I'm a really strong believer that if you're not going to do something with that email immediately, file it away. Because otherwise it just starts adding up. And candidly, there's a lot of things in there that you really don't need to actually engage around. So I'd say set specific, I try to set specific time frames where it's like, okay, for the morning I'm going to check email, I'm going to do read, respond, handle things. Then I'm going to move on to the things that I proactively want to get accomplished. And it ties with what we all talked about in terms of writing things down. So for example, when I start my day, I really think proactively. What are the 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever that number is, things that I absolutely have to get accomplished today? And then you take that, then you have your calls and your meetings and your email. And I think if you start with a proactive thought around what you want to get accomplished with the day, then the email doesn't manage you, and then you can kind of box it into spaces that you have. But generally I do like morning, midday, afternoon, evening, after my kids go to bed, kind of best practice. But I think if you really think proactively about your day and what you need to get accomplished, then you can manage the email versus the email managing you. But I'm sure they have lots of other inputs. It's tough.
I mean, my career started, I worked for a company that shut email down every single day from 9 in the morning until noon and from 1 until 5.
That's a great
Because
idea.
the philosophy was, if you're on email, you're not with customers, right? So I kind of, similar to you, I mean, my team knows I'm not on email very much. Like I'm on email in the morning and I'm on email in the evening. I'm rarely on email during the day. If someone's getting an email from me during the day, I'm on a plane that has Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Because it's just not, I tend not to use it. But my best practice too is if there's something urgent, somebody should be phoning or texting me. Like I would be shocked if I ever got an email with an urgent issue because it's not going to get addressed possibly till the end of the day.
Thank you.
Another question?
Hello, great. Thank you for the conversation, very inspiring, thoughtful. I'm still processing it. What I would like to hear from you, I heard a lot about leadership and career advice. Can you share what is your personal innovation, maybe the key innovation that you learned in your professional and personal lives that you want to share with us?
Well, I need a minute to think about
Okay.
that. I got 4 kids.
wanna
I got
go
lots
ahead?
of stories.
Yeah, no, I'll go after you.
Okay, great. I'll take it. It's awesome.
You're always quick.
So,
You're quick on your feet.
I would just say, you know what, I would say this. I remember when I first started in consulting, someone said to me, don't take it personally. And I just frankly think that's just a lot of BS. It is personal. What you're up to from a career perspective is personal. It's your personal brand, what you care about. And I remember a role that I'd gotten promoted for, and it was really kind of vague. And I said to the person that hired me, hey, do you have any inspiration or ideas, or what do you really want to see? And you know what? They looked at me and they said, be yourself. That's why you got the job in the first place. And it really stuck with me. Think about the attributes that you really want to develop, whether it's from an industry strength perspective. I really believe strongly in diversifying your experience. Sales, operations, alliances, all kinds of different roles, marketing, communications, those are functions. So you don't need to have a set job, but think about the functions and the attributes and the skills you're developing, and then apply them in lots of different circumstances across companies. That would be my input. And take it personally. I do.
I would add, so from an innovation, it's funny, if you look at things, it's not like I hold a patent. I served as a VP of marketing for close to 15 years and in other executive roles for longer than that. But I think about the creativity of it, and everything that I approach, I think about good, better, best. And it's a way of kind of scaling into things, because sometimes you think about projects and they're just too big or too grand and they're not digestible, but it's good to outline good, better, best, and then figure out, how do you get started? Another friend of mine calls it crawl, walk, run. It's how do you get started and do something that's good enough to get on, get in the game. Maybe next step is a little bit better if you have a little more budget, a little bit more time, a little bit more resources. And then best is, what, this is going to make us seem unique and differentiate. And I'll always look at everything that I do in that standpoint, whether it's, our PR media campaign, how we participate inside of an event or an activity. It really helps and again, being in marketing, I look at ways to project the company's brand or my own personal brand in a bigger way than what it is. So again, that's another thing that somebody said, is like think big, start small, act fast. Another way to think about it.
We have about a minute left, and so if you have more questions, I would encourage you to follow up with the panelists afterwards, and certainly if you have any questions of me as well. What I thought we could do as we approach and close out the session, maybe if everyone could provide a one-sentence summary of what is your key takeaway for the audience. And I'll start by saying that you don't need to own it to control it, because we have an expanding universe, but there are many ways that you can really expand your influence.
You're a writer, because that was perfect. I don't know if I can do that well. You know, I think asking, not telling, great things emerge. And avoid the I know. Avoid the words I know. So.
I would say broaden your concept of team. Really think about the fact that this is a relatively small world that we're working within, and we're very connected with social media. Think that everyone around you actually can help you. It's just a concept of enrolling them and helping you, and really think very carefully about how you can have a team around you that's not just your core team.
I'll leave you with the thought of your own personal brand. Make sure to take the time. You know, we all run so fast and so hard to the next project, but take a step back and think about, are you doing enough for you? And making sure that if there's a career desire that you have, a project you want to work on, recognition, make sure to carve out enough time so that you can build towards what you want to do, and make sure that you're living the life you want to live versus just running from project to project. So I guess my message is take the time for you and to build your brand.
That's great. Thank you all for
Thank you.
participating in this.
Thank you,
I have a personal ask. We have a survey that my company is running, and it's going to go into my next book on leadership. So if you could take a moment to go on that link and take our survey, I'd really, really appreciate it. And I'd like to give a hand to our panelists. What a fabulous conversation. Thank you.